Today we're going to be in the Unit 2 packet called Linear Functions and Inequalities, and we're going to be on page 25. So today is pretty much the exact same as the previous notes video. The only thing is that we're going to be adding interval notation when we're writing our answer. So interval notation is another way of expressing the answer to an inequality. It uses parentheses and brackets to show where the graph starts and ends. So you're going to use parentheses when you have an open circle, and you're going to have brackets when you're using a closed circle. You're always going to use parentheses. Oh, that's really ugly. Let me rewrite that. With infinity and negative infinity. Okay, we kind of talked about this when we talked about domain and range, so now we're just going to get some more practice on it. So let's start off with example number 1. So we have 4x plus, or 4 parentheses, x plus 3 is greater than negative 24. So when you're solving this, you got to get rid of the parentheses. So in order to do that, I'm going to distribute the 4 to both things in the parentheses. And that's using the operation of multiplication. So 4 times x is 4x, and 4 times 3 is 12. Then I'm going to bring down my sign and my negative 24. Now I'm just going to solve it like normal. So I need to get 4x by itself. So to move that positive 12, I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides. And then negative 24 minus 12 is negative 36. And then the last thing I have to do is divide both sides by 4. So x is going to be greater than negative 9. Now I'm going to come over to my number line. I'm going to put negative 9 right in the middle. It's just a greater than sign, so I'm going to be using an open circle. And then since it's greater than, I'm going to shade to the right. All right, so that's pretty much everything we covered in the last video. Now we're adding the new thing, which is interval notation. So this is basically saying that x is greater than negative 9. So x can be from 9 or from negative 9 all the way up to positive infinity. So negative 9 is an open circle. I'm going to use a parentheses. Then I'm going to write negative 9. And then since this is pointing to the right, it's pointing to positive infinity. And then like the note said, we always use a parentheses with infinity. All right, just think, if the arrow is pointing to the right, you're going to use positive infinity. If it's pointing to the left, you're going to use negative infinity. All right, let's do another example. Number 2, x minus 3 parentheses x plus 2 is greater than 4. So the first thing I need to do is get rid of my parentheses. So I'm going to distribute this negative 3 to x and 2, which is using multiplication. So negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Now everything else I'm just going to bring down. All right, now to solve, I need to get all of my regular numbers to the right side. So to move this negative 6, I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So that gives me 10 over on the right side. And then I can go ahead and combine my like terms of x and negative 3x. And that's going to give me negative 2x. Because 1 minus 3 is negative 2. Now to get x by itself, I have to divide. So I'm dividing both sides by a negative 2. All right, we're dividing by a negative number. So I'm going to flip my inequality sign. So that's going to flip to less than. Then I have x on the left, and 10 divided by negative 2 is negative 5. So now we're going to graph that on our number line. So I'm going to put negative 5 in the middle. It's just less than, so I'm going to have an open circle, and then I'm going to shade to the left because it's less than. Now remember what I said, if it's pointing to the left, it's negative infinity. If it's pointing to the right, it's positive infinity. So our interval notation for this one is going to be parentheses negative infinity all the way up to negative 5. And that's an open circle, so I'm going to put a parentheses. All right. Number 3. 7x minus 2 parentheses x minus 4 is less than or equal to negative 2. So the first thing I have to do is get rid of my parentheses. So I'm going to distribute this negative 2 to the x and to the negative 4 using multiplication. So negative 2 times x is negative 2x, and negative 2 times negative 4 is a positive 8. Everything else I'm just going to bring down. Now, I need to get all my numbers onto the right side, so I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides, which leaves me with negative 10. And then I can go ahead and combine my like terms here. So 7x minus 2x is 5x. Now I got to get x by itself, so I'm going to divide both sides by 5. So x is going to be less than or equal to negative 2, because negative 10 divided by 5 is negative 2. All right, so now we're going to graph it. So I'm going to put negative 2 right in the middle of my number line. Since it's less than or equal to, I'm going to put a closed circle, and I'm going to shade to the left. All right, remember, if it's pointing to the left, it's negative infinity. If it's pointing to the right, it's positive infinity. So my interval notation for this one is going to be parentheses, negative infinity, comma, negative 2. And then since negative 2 has a closed circle, I'm going to be using a bracket. All right, let's look at number 4. So we have negative 8 parentheses x minus 1 minus x is less than or equal to negative 28. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of my parentheses. So I'm going to distribute that negative 8 to the x and to the negative 1. And that's using multiplication. So negative 8 times x is negative 8x. And negative 8 times negative 1 is positive 8. Now I need to get all of my regular numbers on the right side. So to move that positive 8, I'm going to subtract by 8 on both sides, which gives me negative 36. And then I'm going to combine my like terms of negative 8 and negative x. And that's going to give me negative 9x. Now I'm going to divide both sides by a negative 9. And we're dividing by a negative number. So my inequality sign is going to have to flip to greater than or equal to. So I'm left with x is greater than or equal to negative 36 divided by negative 9, which is positive 4. Now I'm going to move to my number line. I'm going to put positive 4 right in the middle. It's greater than or equal to, so I'm going to have a closed circle, and I'm going to shade to the right. So if it's pointing to the right, it's positive infinity. If it's pointing to the left, it's negative infinity. So my interval notation, I'm going to have a bracket with 4 because it's a closed circle, comma, positive infinity with a parentheses, because you always use parentheses with infinity signs. All right, let's move to the back. All right, so now we're looking at examples where we have variables on both sides. Okay, we've already learned how to solve equations like this, so we're going to do pretty much the same thing. Okay, remember you want all your variables on the left side and all of your regular numbers on the right side. So my first thing, I need to move this negative 2x to the left side with the 6x. So to do that, I'm going to add 2x to both sides. So that's going to give me 8x plus 1 is less than 9. All right, then I got to move all my regular numbers to the right side. So this positive 1 needs to move, so I'm going to subtract 1 on both sides. And I get 8. All right, then my last step is to divide both sides by 8. So x is going to be less than 1. All right, now for the graph, I'm going to put a positive 1 in the middle. It's just a less than sign, so I'm going to put a closed circle. And I'm going to, I'm going to put an open circle. And I'm going to shade to the left. Okay, remember, if it's pointing to the left, it's negative infinity. If it's pointing to the right, it's positive infinity. So my interval notation is going to be parentheses, negative infinity, comma 1 with a parentheses because it's an open circle. All right, number 6. 2x minus 1 is less than or equal to 6x plus 20, or 5x plus 20. So I need to move all my letters to the left side. So to move that positive 5x, I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides, which gives me negative 3x. Then everything else I bring down. Now I need to move all my regular numbers to the right side. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So I'm left with negative 3x is less than or equal to 21. Then I need to get rid of that negative 3, so I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3. I'm dividing by a negative number. So remember, my inequality sign is going to flip to greater than or equal to. Then I have x is greater than or equal to negative 7. So now I'm going to put it on my number line. I'm going to have negative 7 in the middle with a closed circle because it was greater than or equal to. And then I'm going to shade to the right. Remember, if it's pointing to the right, it's positive infinity. If it's pointing to the left, it's negative infinity. So my interval notation is going to be bracket, because it's a closed circle, negative 7, comma, positive infinity with a bracket. All right, number 7. We have 3 minus parentheses 2x minus 7 is less than or equal to 34 minus 6x. So I need to get rid of my parentheses. So this negative sign is a negative 1. So I'm going to distribute that negative 1 to both things inside the parentheses, and that's using multiplication. So negative 1 times 2x is negative 2x. Negative 1 times negative 7 is positive 7. I bring everything else down. So now, before I can start moving things to the other side, I need to combine my like terms on both sides. So the left side has like terms of 7 and 3, so I can combine those by adding, and I get 10. All right, now I can move all of my letters to the left side. So I'm going to add 6x to both sides. Which gives me 4x. And then I need to move all my numbers to the right, so I'm going to subtract 10 on both sides. I ran out of room, so I'm going to rewrite it at the top, and then my last step is to divide by 4. So x is going to be less than or equal to 6. So on my number line, I'm going to put 6 in the middle. It's less than or equal to, so I'm going to put a closed circle. And then I'm going to shade to the left. Okay, remember if it's pointing to the left, it's negative infinity. If it's pointing to the right, it's positive infinity. So my interval notation is going to be parentheses, negative infinity, comma 6 with a bracket because it's a closed circle. All right, number 8, we have negative 3 parentheses x plus 2 is, or x plus 2 minus 3x is less than 2x plus 18. So the first thing I need to do is get rid of the parentheses. So I'm going to distribute my negative 3 to both things in the parentheses, and that's going to be using multiplication. So that's negative 3x and negative 6. Then I'm going to bring everything else down. All right, like I said before I start moving things to the other side, I need to combine like terms on either side if it's needed. So here I have negative 3x and a minus 3x. So I can combine those and get a negative 6x. All right, now I want to get all my regular numbers on the right, so I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So that leaves me with negative 6x is less than 2x plus 24. Now I need to subtract 2x on both sides, which gives me negative 8x is less than 24. Then I ran out of room, so I'm going to finish writing it at the top. And then my last step is to divide by a negative 8. And since I am dividing by a negative number, my inequality sign has to flip to greater than. So I'm going to have x is greater than negative 3. So on my number line, I'm going to have a 3 in the middle with an open circle because it's just greater than. And then I'm going to be shading to the right because it's greater than. Now remember, if it's shaded to the right, it's going to be positive infinity. If it's shaded to the left, it's negative infinity. So our interval notation is going to be parentheses because it's an open circle at negative 3. And then positive infinity with a parentheses. All right, number 9. So we have parentheses on both sides this time, so we got to get rid of those first. So I'm going to take this negative 3 and distribute it to both things inside the parentheses, and this is using multiplication. So that's negative 3x and minus 18. All right, on the other side, there's a -1 in front of that parentheses, so I need to distribute it to both sides. So that's going to be -1x plus 7. Now, anything not involved with the parentheses, I went ahead and brought down. So now I need to combine like terms on both sides before I start moving things around. So on the left side, we have 5x and -3x as like terms. So I can combine those. So 5x minus 3x is 2x. Bring down the -18. And then I guess that's the left side. So then on the right side, we have +8 and +7 are like terms. So 8 plus 7 is 15, and then I bring down the -1x. Now I need to move all of my regular numbers to the right side. So I'm going to add 18 to both sides. Which gives me 2x is greater than or equal to 33 minus 1x. And then I need to move that -1x to the other side, so I'm going to add 1x to both sides. So that's going to leave me with 3x is greater than or equal to 33. And then my last step is to divide by 3. So x is greater than or equal to +11. Now I'm going to put that on my number line. I'm going to put 11 in the middle with a closed circle because it's greater than or equal to, and I'm going to shade to the right. Remember, if the arrow is pointing to the right, it's positive infinity. If it's pointing to the left, it's negative infinity. So my interval notation, I'm going to have a bracket because it's a closed circle with 11, then positive infinity with a parentheses. All right, and then the last one, number 10. Again, we have parentheses on both sides that we need to get rid of. So this parentheses has a -1 in front of it. So I'm going to distribute that out using multiplication. So that would be -3x minus 3. And then on the other side, I have a -4 that I need to distribute inside the parentheses, and that's using multiplication. So that gives me -4x plus 8. Now I need to combine like terms on both sides before I start moving stuff around. So on the left, I have -3x and -2x, which are like terms. So if I combine those, I get -5x. Then I'm going to bring down that -3. And then on the right side, I have +8 and -2, which are like terms. And if I combine those, I get a +6. Now I need to move all of my regular numbers to the right side. So to move this -3, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Which gives me 9. And then to move that -4x to the left side, I'm going to add it. Which gives me -1x. All right, now I need to get rid of that -1, so I'm going to divide both sides by a -1. We're dividing by a negative number, so my inequality sign is going to flip to less than. And then 9 divided by -1 is -9. So we're going to graph that on our number line. I'm going to put -9 in the middle with an open circle because it's just less than. I'm going to shade to the left. Now remember, if it's shaded to the left, it's negative infinity. If it's shaded to the right, it's positive infinity. So my interval notation here is going to be parentheses, negative infinity, comma, -9 with a parentheses because it is an open circle. So that concludes the notes on linear inequalities and interval notation.